Good morning, my learners and my subscribers to my YouTube channel, Learn with Mr. Mwenya. In my previous videos, I did say that Russian history is quite a lengthy one. We shall be covering it in bits. So today, as you can see here, we are trying to understand more about the Bolsheviks and the Menshiks, understanding more about two of the dominant political parties that existed in the Russian history at the time. Now, from here, first we must understand the similarities that existed between these two political parties. So, number one is that they both came from the same party in Russia, called the Russian Social Democratic Labor, or you can say Workers' Party, which was founded in 1898. They both came from the same party. So these two political parties, Mensheviks and the Bolsheviks, came from the same party, but there were factions within the party such that by 1903, this party split into two. Number two, they were both opposed to the Tsarist repressive regime administration. They both did not agree what Tsar was doing or to the forms of laws that he enacted, put in place to make sure that he intimidates the opposition. They both were interested in removing Tsar Nicholas II or II from power through a process of a revolution. They both believed that the Tsar's rule must come to an end. That they agreed. They were led by revolutionary leaders such as Vladimir Lenin and of the Bolsheviks and Julius Martov of the Mensheviks, who were wishing to form government. In other words, they were both led by leaders who desired to form government, revolutionary leaders. They cooperated together on common matters that benefited both parties. Whenever there was an issue where both parties benefited, they came together and cooperated. Lastly, but not the least, both parties were seen as being a danger to the Tsarist rule. In other words, we are saying that both parties were not liked by the Tsarist rule. As such, mostly they were in danger, they were in exile, they were kept away on the Russian political stage. Let's continue. We are looking at now the differences between them, the difference between the parties, Bolsheviks and the Mensheviks. And one difference that you can find on A is that Lenin was the revolutionary leader of the Bolsheviks. Lenin was the top leader. Whilst on the other side, Julius Martov, as earlier indicated, two different points there. B, the name of the party Bolsheviks meant the majority member, or those that belong to the majority vote of the Bolsheviks. B here, the name meant the minority member. So the Bolsheviks majority member, Mensheviks the minority member. C, they believed that an immediate armed revolution was possible to overthrow Tsarist rule. In other words, Vladimir Lenin believed that we don't have to wait for the process to take longer to overthrow the government. We can possibly do it quickly as long as we were united. Whilst the counterparts, the Mensheviks, believed that only a gradual process of a revolution was possible. It should take time, slowly but sure, but we shall achieve. That's not Lenin's thinking. D, the Bolsheviks believed that a dictatorship socialist system of government where the state fully controlled the means of production and the state property was possible. In other words, we should have a government where the state has full control over the factories, the industries, the means of production, whilst for the counterparts, the Mensheviks believed in a socialist democratic system where there should be parliamentary form of government in place. They are not advocating for full control of the state, but that the government should have some form of limited power through parliamentary system. Last but not least, for Vladimir Lenin and the Bolsheviks, they only wanted the proletariat, poor working class, those that had struggles within the Russian economic system to be members of this party. Whilst the Mensheviks, they advocated for everyone to come on board. In fact, even the capitalists who desired to overthrow the government, they were put on board. So this was against Lenin's thinking. Shall we continue? Now, having learned or discovered the differences, these two political parties were the mainstay of the Russian political system, where they wanted to remove the Tsar. Such that by 1917, we have got several causes, many causes that pushed for the Tsar to finally end his rule. So, on the causes of the February-March 1917 revolution, if you can see here, we are talking about February-March. It depends with the calendar that was used. The Russian calendar the Russian society followed the Gregorian calendar, while other parts of the world, they follow the Georgian calendar. So that's why you find February-March, it depends with the calendar that you are using. However, long-term causes. The defeat in the Russo-Japanese War of 1904 left discontentment in some Russian citizens. Yes, it happened a long time ago, 1904, but some Russian citizens or masses did not love how that war ended. They just wanted the war to go. Number two, failure to honor the promise contained in the October Manifesto of 1905. You remember in the previous video, I did say that after 1905 revolution, the October Manifesto document was released to promise to the people of what would be possible. One of the things that was proposed was the creation of the Russian parliament called the Duma, where the Tsar was not going to have absolute power, but the parliament was going to be given power. There was going to be freedom of association, right to form political parties, and other laws. Those were not fully honored. You can see from 3, the Bloody Sunday of January 22, 1905 event. You remember when the royal troops shot at the defenseless protesters who had gone to St. Petersburg Palace to demand for certain reforms. They were shot at. A lot of people still remained with that hateful mind. 4, the problems with the Duma. The created House of Law Assembly was not given full power to make independent decisions. Yes, the Tsar allowed for the creation of a parliamentary system. Unfortunately, that House of Assembly, House of Law, did not have full power. Oftentimes, the Tsar overrode its decision. Lack of enough industries to cater for the growing Russian population. Mostly, Russians depended on imports. This left the country of high unemployment levels. A lot of people desired for industries, more industries, so that it can cater for their goods and services, and also to have enough for themselves. Last but not the least, on long-term, repressive rule of the Tsar Nicholas of not allowing opposition parties and leaders to give checks and balances. Vladimir Lenin, Julius Martov, and other political leaders and parties, they were oftentimes slapped with punishment. They were kept in exile. These are long-term causes. We shall now go to short-term causes. So, on the short-term reasons or causes of the 1917 revolution, you can see Tsar's decision to join the World War I in 1914, feeling overconfident to win the war against the Germans, was largely condemned by the Russians. The Russian people understood that Russia was not in a position to fight the Germans on the Eastern Front. But Tsar continued with that decision, and the results of that decision were very fatal, they were very bad. That left a lot of Russians very unhappy. Two, Tsar's poor leadership abilities. He was condemned, for example, to take the role of the commander of the armed forces at the battlefront without proper military skill or knowledge. The Tsar should have just been in his office at his palace advising what next, but he decided to become the top man at the war front, and he did not have the military skill, he did not have the military knowledge. The results, as indicated earlier, they were very bad. Soldiers lost the war. They experienced many losses. Lack of morale among Tsarist soldiers, who became tired fighting a losing battle, added pressure to the Tsarist government. Like indicated, the Russian soldiers were ill prepared. They did not have modern weapons. They did not have proper leadership. They experienced losses. As such, many of them lost morale and they could barely fight any longer. Number 4, the power Tsar entrusted in Gregory Rasputin and his wife Tsarina during the World War I was greatly hated by Russians. Rasputin himself was believed to have mystical religious powers to make things happen for the Tsar's administration. This man oftentimes controlled the state through the powers he was believed to have. Now, the administration kept on making a lot of blunders, a lot of mistakes, a lot of wrong decisions. This left the country very angry. Gregory Rasputin himself was actually murdered later by the people. Shortage of fuel, food, essential goods and services during World War I made Russians upset. During the war, the government, Tsar's government, they concentrated on making sure that they win the war. So the economy was in shambles. Fuel shortage, food shortage, and just essential goods and services. As such, many people were left upset. Second, last, we can say peasants demand to have access to personal land and workers demand for better working conditions. This issue started from 1905, demand revolution, you remember, but it did not change for any better. As such, it just added to more pressure of concerns. Last but not the least, strikes and riots broke out. Strikes and riots made governing difficult, and Tsar had to abdicate the throne in 1917. So all these reasons, 1917, long-term causes, short-term causes, just brought pandemonium to the Russian society, such that Tsar Nicholas II had to abdicate the throne and just let the Russians decide their fate. This has been Mr. Mwenya on Russian history. Until the next lesson, where we'll be discussing the next government that was formed, the provisional government, and what next. Bye.